Hi, so I want to talk a bit on the point of prevention versus reaction strategies to negative outcome, to unwanted outcomes. And here for me the question was firstly, what is the negative outcome? How can one define it? Because negative can be very subjective. So let's define negative outcome as negative consequence as abusive and harmful behavior or outcomes that is not best for self and not best for all. Okay, from this point it is basically easy to see that the prevention of negative consequence equals abuse or harm to self and all, or self as life, any other life form, is best to prevent and not to let it play out and then react to the outcome, which would be the reactive strategy. We, for example, have a point or a being doing something and playing out abusive behavior, and then one would let the whole point get to the point of acting out and manifesting abuse or harm. The preventive strategy would be to intervene before the point plays out, and preferably even before such points and patterns that result in outcomes that is not best for all, that is in consequence abusive and harmful to life. It would be best to prevent such points from the get-go, from before it even starts manifesting, before even the pattern can before the pattern starts and accumulates then into the negative outcome. So how do one do that? Or the point is that that means I have to know before a harmful, abusive outcome manifests, how points will play out and how, for example, the initial environmental conditions must be or must not be for such an outcome or behavior or pattern, first pattern then outcome, comes into being and then manifests. So prevention means education, means means understanding, commonsensical understanding of how oneself functions if one wants to prevent consequence for self, which is equal to understanding how the world system functions, or the world we live in functions, which is then equal to seeing possibilities to prevent negative, harmful, abusive consequences and outcomes in the world. So this goes pretty much hand in hand. And the interesting thing with reaction is that it accumulates further consequence. Let's take as an example a teen that grows up and starts, let's say he or she got some morals and rules from the parents, like, yeah, you don't drink, you don't do drugs, yeah, just basically like this, without further explanations, or even also the parents at that stage not understanding, for example, why it gets to the negative, harmful outcomes of, for example, manifestation of addictions, or all the points that go with it, like bad health, or like homelessness, generally the consequences of alcohol and drugs are known, but they are known only as the outcomes, the extensive negative pictures, for example, of or stories of addicts, of beings that died from drugs, and this is what parents then fear. So they want to not have this outcome. And they don't want to have this outcome for the child, but the point is not seeing how and what factors and environmental influences, for example, lead to the manifestation of such points as negative outcomes, as consequences. And thus, as it is not seen, it is not discussed, for example, beforehand, before these points manifest in nature, in the in the life of the teenager, of the kid, of the child, and it manifests. Now the parents react to this with, for example, punishing or disappointment, or disappointment, such things where what can be with negative feedback, which can be and is interpreted by the child as a punishment. And so what happens with this, without the understanding of how the whole thing has manifested, is that probably the child will react again with, yeah, what the fuck do you want from me? The child will go, for example, in a rebellion and retaliation point and turn away and separate themselves more from the parents, because in fact the child knows that the parent don't know and didn't, for example, explain to them what, why, when, how, will, can, is probable that it will manifest in these ways. The point of taking alcohol and drugs, because if one look at it, it is in our current world, and like it is at the moment, very probable that a child will sooner or later get to the point of taking drugs or alcohol, which is a drug. So now the child will not understand really, and possibly also not wanting to understand why the parents are now reacting to it, and again will react within itself. So we have like a chain reaction that is separating the both parties then and creating separation. And so for example, the child will not any longer trust the parents, and the parents will be more mistrusting and become more fearful, because they have the perception and they see the situation as if, and what is happening, they fear losing more the control they perceive they have about the child, and as it is not like doing what it should and so the reactive strategy will further separation, will further ego, will further the consequence, and the negative consequence as abuse, as harm. Now, what would be preventive, a preventive approach to the point would be to not believe that no, this can't happen to my child, because this is like a wish of the parent that is projected onto the child, which is like illusionary, and thus, for example, the point will not be considered beforehand at all, like ignored. Also, it is obviously lots of work to look at such a play out, and how this point this like single topic, let's put it this, will play out in the life of a child, and how it is commonly playing out. So now the parent would have to go investigate, for example, drugs would have to investigate the psychological factors that can or will lead to manifestation of addictions or certain more extensive mental instabilities or points like this. And yeah, I mean, the main point what I see is why this is not done is like ignorance, I mean, and not wanting to put in the effort to research the points oneself. It's like perceived to be easier to not look at it. However, it is also a point or a part of it is also wanting to preserve the own self-image and idea of oneself, because as for example the parent is now grown up, they have like forgotten apparently what they have done as a child or teen was like exactly the same. They have gone through exactly the same phases or points, yet now they are apparently grown up and have learned their lessons and so forth. Now this pattern I see now is also playing out then with with not only parents but for example political or religious leader or whatever, where one or the beings went through, for example, fucked up times or abuse and harmful consequence, and when they are in certain positions, then the point is forgotten and there will be used reactive methods and reactive approaches instead of really like looking, okay, so has this played out for me, now how can we prevent this completely, how can we prevent the problems. Yeah, so what would be what is the vital point within the preventive approach is to really get to know oneself and get to know the world, so that one can see, understand and realize when there exists certain circumstances, or I am participating in this and this pattern, or this and this pattern will lead to this and this. It's basically the ability to see how things will play out, and for this obviously is necessary education. I have to educate myself on how things work to predict or reason how the outcome will be. For this one can firstly investigate oneself, one's own life with writing, with self-forgiveness, and yeah, for example, read other people's blogs or self-forgiveness, or also like investigate, look at or see other people's consequence. I mean, I can as well see, so now here this pattern or another being has played out this in this way, so if I do exactly like the same, the probability is high that my consequence will be equal. So if I do not want to go there, then I can prevent it in not going there. And yeah, obviously the consequence or education in a sense that includes the world as a whole is the vital points to educate oneself on the money system, the economic system, the political system, points that I, for example, feared and disliked for a long time and actually hated, and still have to like get myself to investigate this point. Okay, so obviously, or prevention is the best cure. That is known and certain. The point is here also what comes up for me now is that firstly one must be willing to acknowledge that there is something like negative consequence, and that it can be prevented, and that there is another way, not only for oneself but for this world as a whole, which is considering all life as equal and aligning one's life according to this principle. So that's me for today. Bye.